Boa tarde a todos. Bem-vindo ao Conselho do Atlântico. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Atlantic Council. And on behalf of our chairman, John Rogers, and our president, Fred Kemp, it's my privilege and pleasure as vice president of the Atlantic Council and director of its Africa Center to welcome all of you this afternoon. I see, looking across the audience, many distinguished friends of the council, so you'll forgive me if I opt for that Africanism, all protocols observed. I did, however, want to especially welcome His Excellency Manuel Domingos Augusto, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Angola. I'm pleased to note that this is not the minister's first time here at the Atlantic Council. If I recall correctly, Senor Ministro, the last time you honored us with your presence was the breakfast roundtable we organized 2 years ago for then Minister of Defense and now President of the Republic, João Lourenço, the morning after the signing of the historic Memorandum of Defense Cooperation between the United States of America and the Republic of Angola. The fact that the Atlantic Council had the distinction of being the only Washington think tank to host the then minister and now president before his election to his current high office, but that we also had the opportunity to have your distinguished predecessor, Minister George Rebelo Chicote, on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of diplomatic relations between our two countries, and on yet other occasions in partnership with our good friends from the U.S.-Angola Chamber of Commerce. We've also had the opportunity and the honor to provide platforms for other ministers and senior officials from Angola. All this is in keeping with the raison d'etre, or should I say, the raison d'être, for which the Atlantic Council's Africa Center was established, to help transform U.S. policy approaches to Africa by emphasizing the building of strong geopolitical partnerships with African states and strengthening economic growth and prosperity on the continent, which I'm pleased to observe is in perfect complementarity with the strategy of President João Lourenço for the new Angola. Now, before turning the floor over to my colleague, Maria da Cruz, president of the U.S.-Angola Chamber, for a few remarks and the introduction of the minister, permit me also to address uma palavra de boas-vindas to the new His Excellency Joaquim do Espírito Santo, Angola's new ambassador to the United States. Excellencia, please always feel at home here at the Council. As many of your African colleagues know, truly our doors are always open to you. So welcome. And with that, I'm pleased to welcome to the podium Maria da Cruz, president of the U.S.-Angola Chamber of Commerce.
Boa tarde. Eu também tenho que falar em português, já que o Peter começou a falar. I said I also need to speak in Portuguese since you started your remarks in Portuguese as well. Excellency Minister Manuel Augusto and the delegation that accompanies him, all distinguished guests, members of the panel. I will also say, as Peter Pham mentioned, there are so many distinguished guests in this room, so I'm just going to say all protocols observed as well. It's with great pleasure that the U.S.-Angola Chamber of Commerce partners with the Atlantic Council on this initiative regarding the new Angola. For us, the U.S.-Angola Chamber of Commerce has been promoting trade and investment between the U.S. and Angola for 29 years, actually even predating U.S.-Angola official relations, which are now, I think, 27 years this May. With that, I will say that when the Embassy of Angola contacted us and said that the minister would like to speak on the new Angola, we thought of no better place to do it than the Atlantic Council for the main reason that Peter said, the fact that the current president of the Republic actually did address in this very room before becoming president, His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço. Another thing to be noted is the fact that when the embassy said the minister wanted to speak, they made it very clear that they wanted it to be on record and open to the public. And to me, that was a clear sign of the reforms that the government of Angola is putting in place and the fact that they want to be open and willing to be accountable for those reforms. I would also like to say that the fact that in August, a month where many are on vacation, to see this room the way it is today really is a testament and a sign that there is great interest in Angola and that there are key things taking place in the country, and they see U.S. partners do see opportunities in the country. The minister will discuss several things taking place, so I will not touch on that. Don't want to take away his what great things we'll hear from him. But I do want to say that it's a great sign for us, the U.S. Angola Chamber of Commerce, who we've been really advocating U.S. investment in Angola for all these years, as well as supporting Angolan investors coming to the United States to see such great engagement between both countries. And we look forward to continuing to play our role in pushing forward private sector investment between both countries. With that, I have the distinguished honor of presenting His Excellency Manuel Domingos Augusto, who is the Minister of Foreign Affairs, formerly a journalist and ambassador. He was appointed Minister of Foreign Affairs by President João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço on September 28, 2017, entrusting him with the country's diplomacy and foreign and bilateral affairs. Prior to that, he was Secretary of State of Foreign Affairs, Vice Minister of Social Media, and has served as ambassador of Angola to Ethiopia, to Zambia, and was head of the first Angolan diplomatic mission to South Africa in 1992. Other positions served include head of Western countries at the Ministry of Trade, and journalist for the Public Television of Angola and newspaper Jornal de Angola. He holds a Master's of Arts in Diplomacy, Diplomatic Counselor Law and Practice, and a degree in Public International Law. Excellency, we look forward to hearing your remarks on the new Angola, and we look forward to an engaging discussion today. Thank you all for coming and taking the time to be here today. And Your Excellency, I welcome you to the podium. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Boa tarde. Ambassador Matthew Arrington, Deputy Assistant Secretary of State for African Affairs, Dr. Peter Pan, dear Maria Cruz, all protocol observed. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation that I have received. I have been honored and pleased to talk to you interactively about the key milestone of the new Angola, projected within the scope of the internal and external policy of the Republic of Angola, since the rise of His Excellency João Manuel Gonçalves Lourenço to power on September 26, 2017, as the third President of the Republic of Angola. This is my return to this very important open and specialized debate, where I was before on 18 May 2017 as the Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs and member of the Angolan delegation. I recall that on that date, His Excellency João Lourenço was the guest of honor of the Round Table on Angola, organized by the Atlantic Council African Center. The current President of the Republic of Angola, João Lourenço, made an official visit to the United States as a Minister of the National Defense and a candidate for the post of President of the Republic. Effectively, the internal and external political action of the current Angolan executive is defined and led to the effective materialization of the MPLA government electoral campaign slogan and program, which has in its main motto, improve what is right and correct what is bad. Ladies and gentlemen, in this context, the Angolan executive gives priority and values, above all, the moralization of society and the fight against all practice that weaken democratic institutions and undermine the trust of citizens and investors, national and foreign, in the state mechanism. I refer, for example, to the pathology of systemic corruption, impunity, nepotism, flattery, and money laundering. For this, the government of Angola has been consolidating the democratic rule of law, to deepen the moral legal framework, to strengthen the application of the principles of good governance and the respect of the human rights, as well the institutional independence by the separation of powers, to encourage private initiative and to speed up the process of the reform of the state on a political, administrative, judicial, financial, and educational point of view. Within the framework of political and administrative decentralization, the first municipal elections are foreseen for the first time in Angola in 2020. With these measures, the Angolan leadership is convinced that the country will have greater openness, democratic tolerance, more transparency, freedom of the press, expression, and manifestation. However, with that in mind, the system of justice must be optimized in order to become resolute against all those who insist in violating the Constitution and the laws prevailing in the Republic. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, the above measures also aim to adequately address Angola's biggest challenge, namely the need for increased domestic production to ensure food security and self-sufficiency, and the diversification of the national economy, making it less and less dependent on oil revenues, as well as the creation of the necessary infrastructure for the implementation of the Continental Free Trade Area as part of the regional integration process. This national goal will only be achieved with the establishment in Angola of a conducive, transparent environment favorable to a competitive private and foreign regional investment in order to attract more foreign investments. The direct investment of entities and business from the United States of America, particularly on the non-oil industry sector, is highly desired and constitutes a priority of the Angolan Sustained Development Strategy. The National Development Plan 2018-2022, prepared under the 2017-2022 Government of Angola program, aspire to foresee the direct investment aimed towards the development of commerce and tourism, education, science and health, manufacturing industry, and the promotion of the agriculture and rural interior development. The increase of the modernization of the infrastructure, the exploration of the renewable energy, and information and communication technology to foster the emancipation between large enterprise as well as small and medium-scale enterprise. I consider it urgent to strengthen the existing strategic partnership dialogue agreement between Angola and the United States in the areas of trade, finance, manufacturing industry, energy, security and human rights, health and justice. The governments of Angola and the United States have the opportunity to explore the various potentialities available in their respective countries and to encourage greater intervention by U.S. companies in the Angolan market. To this end, it is necessary to increase and broaden political dialogue at the highest level and to bring business and business sectors together for the development of a private or public-private partnerships. Angola has passed new legislation that encourages private investments, simplifies the issuance of entry visas to the country. In many cases, they are exemption of visas, as well as created new structures and related institutions to respond to the various concerns frequently raised by foreign entrepreneurs, namely the excess of bureaucracy in the investment process, the delay on issuing of visas, and the difficulties that foreign investors encounter in transferring dividends. The new forms of incentives are more attractive, so I encourage U.S. investors to look to the future with a great optimism. Ladies and gentlemen, Angola shares the feeling of a peaceful, developed, and secure world. In this sense, and on the basis of the accumulated experience in the resolution of 27 years of internal conflict, it has been an unavoidable and crucial actor in the pacification process in the African continent. Angola's commitment to the prevention, management, and peaceful resolution of conflicts and peacekeeping was recognized with its double election, 2003-2004 and 2015-2016, as a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council, counting on the occasion with the decisive contribution of the United States of America. Angola has also been elected twice as a member of the United Nations Human Rights Council and is still serving the second term until 2020. Angola continues to project itself as an exporter of peace, security, stability, and development. Therefore, on July 12, 2019, in Luanda, Angola hosted a four-party summit of the head of state of Angola, Democratic Republic of Congo, Rwanda, and Uganda. Following these summits, the head of state of the four countries will witness in Luanda on August 21st, next Wednesday, the signing of the instruments that enshrine the understanding reached between Uganda and Rwanda, following the démarche undertaken by Angola and assisted by the DRC. It is with this spirit that Angola supported the initiatives of the United Nations, African Union, the Southern African Development Community, the Great Lakes region, the Economic Community of Central African States, the Community of Portuguese language countries, the Portuguese-speaking African countries, and the various other regional and international partners, including bilateral peace initiatives, security and sustainable development, as well as to accelerate the process of regional and continental integration. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, conflicts of various kinds, transnational terrorism, drug trafficking, money laundering, human rights and environment protection, sea piracy, illegal fishing, and migration issues still remain a global challenge. In the scope of terrorism, I want to emphasize the problem of the African continent. In these and other challenges, Angola wants to continue to rely on the United States leadership. Due to the long tradition and common path of success, the convergence of views in various areas of international political agenda, geopolitical, geoeconomic, and geostrategic positions, Angola and the United States have everything to continue to deepen cooperative relations with reciprocal advantage. In conclusion, I would like to reaffirm the determination of the Angolan executive to create a business environment that favors Angolans and Americans, having as a privileged mechanism the dialogue, cooperation, and amendment between the two governments, always striving to contribute to the construction of a new world order, more human in the 21st century, characterized by the principles of mutual respect and complementarity. I thank you very much for your kind attention.
Please. Now I'll invite the rest of my panel up. Thank you. Well, it's my honor to follow that important address with an open conversation between the Honorable Minister and my two other guests, which I'm pleased to announce we were joined by Ambassador Harrington. He's the Deputy Assistant Secretary for Africa at State Department, and Del Renegar, who's the Executive Director of Global Affairs for GE. And together we're going to have a brief conversation on some of the issues the Honorable Minister brought up in his address, and then I want to hear from you, and so be thinking of questions because we'll integrate them in as we go. And so, Honorable Minister, you really have started out by painting a vision of the new Angola, and you're here in Washington. And so I want to ask you, what is something you think most Americans get wrong or don't understand about Angola and the changes that are happening? What do you wish they could better understand about Angola?
Thank you, Aubrey. I think that the first big message is that Angola is a land of opportunities. And based on that, I think that there is a big deficit on communication on what Angola is. People still think of Angola as a country of war,
Yeah.
but also as a country of oil. And what we want to say is that Angola has no more war, still have oil, but have more things than oil. And I think that this is the message we must to pass on.
Yeah.
The second is that Angola is a country of opportunities, not only for the big companies, for the big enterprise.
Like GE.
This is another.
Well, like the oil, it's still good for everyone.
We still have a home for companies like GE, Chevron, Esso, and others, but we still also have huge business opportunities for the small and medium scale American companies, enterprise.
And this is something I'm always pushing because, for example, in America, an average small and medium-sized enterprise is usually defined as a company that makes less than 1 billion in revenue a year. And in Africa, the whole continent, there are only 400 companies that make over 1 billion.
So
there's a good fit between American SMEs to opportunities in African markets, including Angola.
Yes, you got the point. And that's it. When we talk about medium-scale enterprise in America, we are talking about big companies. When we are talking about small companies in America, including family companies, in some sectors like agriculture, that can represent a lot. Anytime I meet my American friends, I can't hide that I'm an Iowa fan. Iowa, because 20 years ago I went to Iowa, and I had the privilege to be in Iowa. So I came here on the framework of International Visitors Program of State Department, and I choose, among other states, Iowa. And I had the privilege to be in Iowa in 4th July. So I think that everybody guessed what I saw. Everybody dressed with American flag, and the big farmer families
and
organizing a picnic, and and this image, I still keep it. And when I'm talking about the small enterprise, I'm talking about this family enterprise in agriculture, for instance, that would be very helpful for Angola. Angola is a reasonable big territory with more than 1,207,000 square kilometers, with the arable lands, very fertile, with a big hydrographic network. So I can imagine some of these higher families in Angola, what they will produce there. And that is a dream for me, to have these companies there.
And the good
But for that, we must tell them
Sure.
that Angola is a land
But
of
not just you,
opportunities.
companies that have had success there have to tell the story, right? So I'll
Yes.
turn to Del now and say, listen, GE's been in Angola since 1958, very long history in Angola. And what are the kind of, what's the story you would like to get out? You think there are some misperceptions of what people think about Angola and doing business in Angola. What's been the GE's experience, and how would you want to tell the message a little differently to other companies that may not be yet in Angola?
Sure. Well, first, it's a pleasure to be here at the Atlantic Council with Peter and with Aubrey. We're old friends. And Angola is indeed an old friend. GE has been in Angola for over 60 years. And interestingly, we're actually celebrating 120 years in Africa this year. So it took us 60 years to find Angola. So everyone else needs to catch up. But honestly, we have had a very good experience in Angola over the last several years. We did sign a company-to-country agreement with Angola in 2015, which is an approach that we use to kind of align the country's strategic vision with what we can do and commit to work together in certain areas to hold regular meetings, regular discussions. So that's been very successful for us. I think things to kind of clarify or understand, certainly on the diversification point, we've been working very closely with Angola across a number of sectors. I won't even mention oil and gas, although it is important. Believe me, it's important. But we have worked in the transportation sector in Angola. We have over 100 locomotives in Angola. We have over 50 aircraft engines in Angola. We provide equipment to over 125 hospitals in Angola. So it's a robust story that we're very proud of. I think another piece that I would mention is we're doing this as a U.S. company with a variety of international partners. You will often hear a lot about China and the role of China in Angola, but actually we're there as an American company. For the locomotives, we brought in the Canadian EDC financing mechanism to finance the locomotives. We've seen huge improvements in the banking sector and foreign exchange there. So there are very interesting stories to be told outside of the oil and gas sector, and it really requires having a local presence. We have nearly 500 employees in Angola, about 80% of them are locals, and we have about 150 suppliers in Angola. So this conversation about SMEs and big companies, we need to have suppliers, and one of the things that we have tried to also do is encourage our American supply chain to move to the continent and join those other 150 suppliers who are in Angola.
And given that big footprint and longevity in the market, what do you think have been the kind of most marked reforms you've seen in this new era of opening in Angola? Are there a couple that you can kind of highlight that have impacted the way you guys do business in Angola?
Well, I guess I'd make a couple points here. First, Mr. Minister, one of the things that we always look to is kind of the World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. And I think one thing for you to consider is how you could help, advance Angola 10 spots, 15 spots, 20 spots, kind of incremental working your way up. I've seen a number of countries do that, try to be the highest country in Africa, or Saudi Arabia actually made a very focused effort several years ago to move up 10, 15 spots on that World Bank Ease of Doing Business Index. So it's no great mystery what foreign investors want. They want what's in that World Bank Ease of Doing Business context. I would say, though, the improvements that we've seen, Aubrey and Mr. Minister, first of all, as I mentioned, the visas. When I would hear that our vice chairman was going to Angola, I would break out in a sweat. I no longer feel that way because I know that that process is working much better than it used to. The foreign exchange, as I mentioned, we've seen a significant improvement in the banking sector over the last year or so. So that's been a big improvement, and we are very encouraged by some of the reforms in procurement taking place. We're continuing to work really hard in healthcare, which is an area where we continue to need help. But look, we've done big deals in Angola that we're very proud of, and we've done it by working hard and by being local.
And Ambassador Harrington, I mean, hearing this probably makes your job easier because
Yes.
you're in part driving a strategic partnership dialogue between the U.S. and Angola. And I'd love to hear from you what, from State Department's view, are the key pillars of that dialogue. We've heard about diversification efforts, but how can we take it deeper into a new level in an age of Prosper Africa and the new OPIC? How will Angola fit in this in the strategic dialogue?
Sure. Thanks, Aubrey. And again, thanks to the Atlantic Council for organizing this event today. I'm delighted to be here. Let me just address first Prosper Africa and then bring it down to the level of Angola. I think many of you in this room know that the administration launched an initiative called Prosper Africa in June. Expanding trade and investment linkages on the continent is a top priority for the administration, and we are working in very concrete ways to try to do that, to bring some new tools to the table and better use the tools that we've had available but have in a sort of a disparate way. And Angola, I hope, will be on the front lines of this effort. It's an exciting time to be working on the U.S.-Angola relationship, Mr. Minister. Angola is clearly in the midst of a transformation. I would say the U.S.-Angola relationship is on the cusp of a very different relationship than it has been in the past. I'll give a couple of examples of that. I mentioned first, Angola has huge potential as a trade partner for the United States and as a force for stability in the region. We have been working to really deepen that partnership in concrete ways since President Lorenzo identified the United States as a key strategic partner in his inauguration speech, which certainly got noticed in Washington, Mr. Minister. Since that time, almost 2 years ago, we've had a number of high-level visits in both directions. In addition to the minister's visit last fall, we had a high-level delegation of a number of cabinet ministers who spent about a week in Washington meeting across the interagency. Going to Luanda, we had the president's former senior advisor for Africa. Our deputy secretary of state was in Luanda in March, in which he co-chaired with the minister our strategic dialogue for the first time in, I think, 4 years. And we touched on the range of issues in the relationship. We have moved to sign a number of agreements to deepen the partnership. We signed a law enforcement MOU in July, which will provide for collaboration in the law enforcement space. There was an agreement signed in April with Exim Bank, which will provide some support for expanded U.S. exports to Angola. And so there are a lot of very concrete things happening, I think, that we're very excited about the relationship.
Yeah, that's fantastic. I mean, I think one of the things that Del brought up, Honorable Minister, was that was for a long time a perception of Angola as being very close to China, and Chinese investment being kind of the rules of the game in China, and trade was very high, at 28 billion back and forth between China and Angola. And now, I mean, you're headed to Japan soon for the Japanese TCAD, and they've, I understand, made a big investment in port in Angola. How do you see kind of the diversification, not only internal to your sectors, but globally? You're looking at new partnerships now in different countries. How do you see Angola kind of approaching different countries, including the U.S., as driving this new Angola?
Yes. Maybe it's good to emphasize that the nature, in general, is enemy of the emptiness. And this is a key point. How did China came to Angola, Africa, and almost in the rest of the world? Because somebody was not there. But looking at this at a very positive way, Angola had a long war, civil war, and in 2002, when Angola ended the war, and as it is usual worldwide, Angola was expected the so famous donors conference, Marshall plans, and so on and so on. none of these things happened. Some of our partners, Western partners, they say, no, Angola is a rich country, you have oil, so find your own way. And Angola had to find his own way. It was a long war, very destructive, and the infrastructures were completely destroyed. We had to do something. So we looked east. So, but the rest is the history. What is important is what Secretary Arrington said. In these last 4 years, but especially in these last 2 years, the exchange between Angola and the United States is really fantastic in all sorts of areas. On the military, on the economy, and energy, and so, which proves that the potential is there. And also there is the goodwill and the willingness is also there. So it's for us, government, to set up the institutional framework for the private sector to operate.
But also to clean out some of that bad history, for example, the things that the reforms that we've heard from the new president is a lot about cleaning out corruption from old regimes, you know, clearing the books with things like things you owed in the U.S., etc., getting to a clean slate.
And this is one of our priorities, and this is one of the things that we are expecting support and cooperation from the United States. Just as a matter of information, I just came now from a meeting with Secretary Mike Pompeo, which went very well. And one of the things that we discussed was exactly this, how we can cooperate. For instance, on this cleaning up operation, we are looking for the retrieve of the assets illegally hidden or exported. So we want the cooperation from the United States, agencies, and justice and security departments. So if they can help us to find in the world where some of the assets are hidden.
Maybe in real estate in Portugal.
So far, the results are coming. In Portugal, not much.
Really?
You will be surprised to know that maybe we have more in Miami than in Portugal.
I just came from Miami this weekend, so I wouldn't be surprised at all.
Oh, I can that I can almost swear to you. And that's why we want this cooperation with the United States, because this is part of our strategy, try to have some cash back, and even some infrastructure back, so that can make easy the programs that we want to implement.
And maybe Ambassador Harrington can comment on that, the kind of support the U.S. can give when countries are trying to get back illicit financing and of resources that were plundered.
Sure, I'll answer that and then maybe make an additional point. I think we've signed a law enforcement MOU. It's a very broad umbrella agreement, but I think it provides a basis for discussion on a whole range of things, including the issue the minister raises. I did want to comment on something the minister mentioned in his remarks. He mentioned that he's heading back to Luanda to be involved in a meeting of 4 African presidents focused on the border dispute between Rwanda and Uganda. And I just wanted to welcome Angola stepping up to address major regional security challenges, clearly involved in that one in a constructive way. I just want to give you, as we say in English, give you a shout out for the role that Angola played in convincing DRC to hold elections last December. And now we've seen a transition taking place there, which is exciting. Angola, as a member of SADC, deployed peacekeeping troops to Lesotho as part of the SADC stabilization mission. So that is something that we welcome and hope that Angola will continue to play a regional leadership role and elsewhere on the continent to address security challenges.
Yeah, and it could be useful for diversification as well. I was just in Botswana a few months ago, and they were talking about helping Angola bring back some of the elephants that fled during the war. to Botswana to bring them back as a tourism asset for
The
Angola.
refugees, we call it the elephant refugees.
And they've been living.
They ran away from the war, they went to Botswana, now they are coming back.
And can help with the tourism,
Yes.
investment story.
Yes.
And so, you want to say something else?
No, I'm following you.
No, I wanted to hear a little bit more on, Del, when you've had efforts to work with the government in efforts around building out local companies and the kind of local content laws, and how have you seen that now in the last 5 to 10 years where they've become very strong? Do you see the growth of Angolan companies that can grow into other parts of your supply chain, maybe even go to other countries?
Yeah. Look, I think Angola, along with a lot of other countries in Africa, have pursued localization policies. And I think certainly starting in the oil and gas sector and then extending to other sectors. Our perspective on this is you have to be careful. In some sectors it makes sense where Angola has a large presence, large capability. It's easy for companies to do. In smaller sectors, it's much harder to do. I won't use Angola as an example, but at one time I think it was either Brazil or Nigeria tried to require that all computers in the country be made in the country.
Yeah.
That kind of stuff does not work very well. We have been able to work on increasing our local content in Angola through a number of ways. One is really working with the government on more flexible approaches, a more holistic view of what localization means.
Phased approaches.
Having local employees, having a local supply chain, not necessarily what percentage of content in every widget is from the country, but a more holistic view about the company's
These
contribution
same
to the
issues
country.
apply to US Exim Bank and how they define American content as well, right? This is not an issue loaned to Angola, an issue all over the world on how we define local content.
Yeah, so I
And
think
globalized supply chains. It's
more flexible approaches to how you look at that. I think recognizing the importance of supply chains. Another thing that we've done, as you know, not many countries speak Portuguese.
That's right.
So again, looking to Brazil and Brazilian companies to also be part of our supply chain in Angola and encouraging more Brazilian companies to be in Angola is a huge piece of it. And also, I think increasing our skilling efforts so we understand that skill development is a huge piece of the new Angola and the Angola growth story. And so looking at the training that we do, skill development work that we do, not in terms of CSR, but really part of our strategy for expanding our footprint in Angola.
Let me just make a point.
Right before you do, I'll say start to raise your hands in a second because we're going to get some questions. Go ahead and make your point.
Okay, but
They gotta
before,
think for a minute.
before the question, it's just about the banking, the banking sector. And I think they'll mention it. And we want to see the banking sector coming, especially when we talk about small and medium scale enterprise from America, from elsewhere. It's difficult for any entrepreneur just to move on abroad if he doesn't see any sign of his financial sector. So, and this is the bank. And the bank in this case can't be Exim Bank or LPIC, or must be private banks, commercial banks. And one of the things that we want to get from the United States is to encourage some of the bank. And we don't need
to create correspondent banking
we don't need
relationships.
the JP Morgan. This, of course, we would be pleased to have the JP Morgan there, but any medium-scale bank also will be welcome, because this is a sign of confidence also for the business people.
Yeah.
So the banking sector is one of the sectors that we are encouraging to come on. We will try next week now in September in New York to organize a roundtable between our president and some of the banking sector leaders. So to discuss it, we need the banking sector there in Angola. Strong banks that can help to drive the economy up.
Absolutely. It's been a constraint on growth, not only for American investors coming in, but Angolan businesses,
Yes,
for them
exactly.
to grow and to go into other
Well,
markets, they need
indeed.
correspondent banking relationships.
Indeed.
So I'll take a series of questions. I may look nice, but I'm not when
Yeah,
it comes to
that's-
moderating. And so, yes, we'll get some questions. We're going to take them in a group. So I'll take these 4 here, and then we'll come back again. So right here, we'll start here, we'll go here, and then these 2.
Bem-vindo, ministro. Eu sou Timóteo, falo português com sotaque Angola. But I'm going to speak English because you speak Iowa English, which is a better accent than Washington. I'm retired from the State Department, 30 years, working on Angola. One of only 2 Americans working on Angola when we had no diplomatic relations. I was in Brussels doing that wonderful place Zaire, and I was with your ambassador to the European Union, and Andy Young was our ambassador to the UN, and he
Yeah.
was down in Georgia all the time.
Golden times.
My question is about, after the Civil War, one thing I noticed and one thing I discussed was the difference between Luanda and the area around Luanda and its petroleum and all those other wonderful areas of your wonderful country. But the people in the South wanted the oil, so they had white South African retired soldiers with weapons moving north against you. And your government, got white Cubans and put them on the beach down there. And the dumb Yankees in the department thought you guys were communists, which you were not. You were just protecting your oil. What is the relationship now between this wonderful country of yours, with a capital in Luanda, which I love? By the way, I did bring elephants when I was retired from South Africa.
The
to
relationship
Sama
between-
National Park.
Yeah.
The relationship between
So what is the relationship now between the capital, dynamic capital in Luanda with oil, and all those wonderful places in Angola, far,
Okay.
far away from you?
so
Thank you.
regional differences. Let's go right here.
Well, thank you. Congratulations, New Angola. I'm have had difficulties to distinguish between the old Angola and New Angola. Maybe
Okay.
you could give us more, tell us the difference. So my question to you, Mr. Ambassador, is what are you doing for the drought that is going on in Angola right now?
Drought.
More than 5 children are dying every single day, according to Voice of America.
Okay.
And I just would like to know. Also, could you please tell us how much money will you acquire in the fight against corruption, and what are you doing with the money? Thank
Okay,
you.
Great.
Very good.
We have these. Let's take these 2 right here. The one in the red and the guy right next to him.
Thank you. Hi.
Right position here. I'll talk. Okay, go ahead.
No,
Go
4
ahead.
questions.
Oh, go ahead.
and,
Thank you, Mr. Minister,
Yes.
for being here. My name is Adriana with BGR Group, and you noted the President Lorenzo has taken a lot of.
Can you just put
Yes. My name is Adriana with BGR Group, and you noticed that President Lorenzo has taken a lot of positive steps towards combating corruption in Angola. And so my question is that nevertheless, there's a lot of American companies, that, such as BGR's client, Africa Growth Corporation, that are still struggling to be compensated for the theft of their assets during the Dos Santos presidency by government officials. And obviously that can have a negative impact on future foreign investment in Angola. So my question is, what will be done to help compensate these American companies who are still struggling to be compensated? And
Okay.
yes, thank you.
Thanks.
That's all. Yeah.
Serafino Oliveira from Angola. Mr. Minister, how concerned should the Angolans be about its Chinese debt? That's the first question.
The Chinese what?
How?
Chinese debt.
Yeah.
Oh.
What? You?
So how concerned should the Angolans be about the Chinese debt?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Number one. Number two, would you like to elaborate more about the U.S. correspondent banks in Angola? Why is it taking so long for the Federal Reserve Bank to allow dollars to be sold in Angola?
Okay. We'll take this round of questions. And then I'll add one to your list, which is we have heard that there's a new privatization process that's been announced.
Okay.
So maybe you can give 2 words on that. But maybe we'll start first, and I'll try to sprinkle some of these around so that you don't have to answer all of them.
Yeah.
But maybe we can start first with the drought, because it's a
Yeah.
direct and easy, well, it's not an easy problem, but it's a direct question.
Yeah.
What's happening with the drought? What are you doing?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much for this question. We are, as you know, we have the south of Angola, the province of Cunene, which border with Namibia, is affected by the desert. There is a desert in that area. And paradoxically, you can see that the water, the source of water to all Southern Africa is Angola.
Okavango.
All the rivers who goes to Zambia, Zimbabwe, Botswana comes from Angola. But the nature is the nature. So Cunene rivers pass through Cunene, and Cunene is the province where we have either drought or flooding. And all along these years, we have been trying to have just palliative measures. For the first time now, and because of this drought for the last 5-6 months, the government took some more in-depth decisions. We are doing some works of deviating
the river.
the course of the rivers to go to the areas more affected. So we expect that for the next 1-2 years, these problems, at least the cycle of recurrent droughts, will not affect the province as much they do now. Only in the south we have, which is in the border with the, and we think that this is the influence of the Kalahari Desert for those who follow this.
And then
Uh,
maybe we can talk into that, because it is talking about a specific region in Angola. I mean, I don't know if there was anything, Ambassador Harrington, you want to add. I don't know if U.S. government's helping with drought or anything of that
I don't
sort.
think there's been an appeal, has there?
Yes, an international appeal.
Okay.
And we are having some response from some international agencies, and namely the USAID.
Yeah.
But the problem is structural. So we are trying
The
to address
infrastructure,
the cause, not the consequences.
And,
So we can say that we will solve this problem.
and perhaps we can take his question about regional differences within Angola. I mean,
No, I want to answer. So that has been a long time, Mr. Daniel. But Angola is a very united country, and the development is harmonized, so we have no problem. And we can say that this is one of the consequences of the war. Angola is the country in Africa, I can say loudly, with less tribalism, ethnic, because the war unites people. So fortunately, we don't have this problem which affects most of the African countries. We just move on as one. And even with the former enemies in the battle, UNITA, MPLA, we are all mixed up. So fortunately, this is one of the positive consequences of the war.
but you do have a challenge of ensuring that economic development reaches people outside the capital, right? So like the people in Luanda, the idea is not that just people who live in Luanda get wealthier and prosperous, but people who live all over Angola.
Yeah,
And I know that-
I would jump in there, Aubrey. You know, I think where you're headed, and Mr. Minister knows this better than I do. You know, Angola is such a large country in terms of the size of the country, and the population centers are very spread out outside of the capital. And so I think one of the challenges, you know, for us as a solutions provider, when we think about healthcare, we think about power, is how do we work on this? And so one additional area where I think the government has been very helpful is they're launching a decentralization power initiative. So more decentralized powers, you know, smaller grids, microgrids, these kinds of solutions focusing not only on renewals but other things. And so that's one area where we're trying to work with the government to make sure that those areas outside of Luanda have the kind of power that they need. And likewise, in the healthcare space, we're using a lot of digital solutions so that you can train, for example, midwives in smaller villages with how to use a V-scan for examining an expectant mother and then translating that information to a larger clinic in a larger city. So I think trying to use technology to connect this very broad and diverse country is an important priority, not only for the private sector, but one that the government is also embracing.
Well, thanks. I think that people will think that I Dell to answer for me.
Yeah. That's a good one, though.
But yeah, I have a good assistant. But let me just say that that's what he said. In terms of development in the country, we are trying to reduce the asymmetries
Yes.
between regions. And of course, as in any country, including the United States, you have New York, you have
Sure,
Washington, you have Houston.
Sure.
And then, if you go to Oklahoma, and these
Yeah.
people will say the same.
Yeah.
So,
Absolutely.
the gap is trying to change, to reduce the gap
Sure.
between the big cities, the big towns, and but one important thing also to say is that we are trying, in terms of development, to try to take this harmonizing. But think, I just want to answer the lady who put the question of FGC. I would say that the answer was given by Dell. In Angola, you have more than 100 American companies. Some of the biggest American companies are in Angola for more than 40 years. And as we just listened to Dell, they are doing business. They are even increasing their investments in Angola. What I can say about this PR, noisy, I will call it, of FGC, is that, okay, they are doing what they have to do. And I am limited to comment on this because there is a litigation going on. This is a judicial problem. But what I can say, the government of Angola has not to do, has no business with the FGC. What we know is that there is a dispute between two private companies, one Angolan, one. This is private dispute. Just to recall that very recently, a U.S. court in Columbia, New York, decided that there is no case against the government of Angola. So that's what I want to say. So.
But maybe you can put it in a larger context because your government has also been very active in trying to clear old debts and ensure that companies are
no, but that's what we want to say.
Yeah.
When there is a responsibility of the government, like we had arrears, payment and arrears for LS Energy,
correct.
was American company, $50 million. When President Lorenzo came to power, we came to the United States, we were told by the authorities, we did everything. So this morning I was told that even, I think that we pay more than the 40 million we owe. Okay, just to make sure that there is no more claim. So this is one thing, is we take our responsibilities, but we can't entertain this kind of campaign from FGC because there is no room for this. Yeah. Even the US courts, they found that there is no room for this dispute. So there are two partners, private partners, they are in dispute, they will solve this problem wherever. Yeah. And I think the best answer about the business environment is what they'll say, but what other American companies can say. On this smear campaign against us, even they put picture of Sudanese troops saying that these are the Angolan troops who seized this company assets in Angola. So this is a very old style of doing extortion.
So maybe we can maybe we can come to opportunities around for more American companies, which is kind of bringing up to privatization. There was recently a plan announced to do
that is
privatization.
actually this is the good news I brought in today when I spoke with Secretary Mike Pompeo. Is that last week Angolan government unveiled its privatization program. We will privatize almost 200 companies, some of them big companies, and some of them coming from the universe of our oil company, Sonangol, which we used to say was a state within a state. And now we are limiting Sonangol to its core business, which is to explore and produce oil. And we are privatizing all these companies on the universe, telecommunications, industry, so many things. And we think this is a huge opportunity for American companies to get in, because most of these enterprises, they have structures, they are even with the international networks, and that can be a huge opportunity.
And there's
We
an
will
opportunity
use the Houston energy and economy event in end of September, I think, to do some kind of road show for those American entrepreneurs interested to show the advantage of this process.
Well, it's even working because this morning I had coffee with someone who was looking at the telecom tower business in Angola for the first time.
We are now tender the fourth operator on telecommunications.
Yeah.
This is a huge opportunity also for American companies.
So the last question in this round, and then I'll take two more, was about Chinese debt. And the debt that Angola may owe to China, and the question is, many people don't even know how much that debt is. So, is it concerning?
This is a good sign. As you know, country was no debt. You must wonder what is going on. More the debt is, more important you become, because the creditors will do everything for you to stand and until you pay your debt. But I'm joking. But what I'm saying is that, the debt with China is still sustainable. Angola has a potential to pay back that debt. And most of this debt was used for infrastructure, and which is good. If there is some wrongdoings in the middle, but the bulk of this debt was used for the infrastructure. After war, as I say, in 2002, Angola had everything destroyed. Just to give you an example, there is the Benguela Railways, where now even some American companies are showing interest to invest on. We rebuilt these Benguela Railways with almost 2.5 billion. These railways was stopped, was not operating for more than 25 years because of the war. And this is one of the most important railways in Africa.
This rail goes into Congo?
It links the Atlantic Ocean in Angola to the Indian Ocean in Tanzania. So this is one of the most important railways in Africa. And that has an impact in the business, for instance, for the mining companies, American mining companies, who are operating in DRC. With these railways, they bring down for almost 40% the operational cost of exploiting the minerals. So it's a very strategic Benguela railways. And so that the rehabilitation was made by China.
Sure.
So this is one example of what I can say about the debt with China.
And
Can I just address, the gentleman asked about correspondent banks and what's taking so long for them to go back. So I just wanted to address that
please.
quickly. Obviously, we can't tell our banks when to go back in Angola. That's a decision they make themselves. When banks pulled out, I think they did it because there was too much risk, lack of transparency, corruption. They will go back when those concerns are addressed and either the risk isn't there or they determine that the risk is manageable. I will just mention that I think the government is taking some important steps in that regard. We have now a formal agreement since, Minister, I think since March, between our Department of Treasury and the government of Angola to try to strengthen the ability of the government to do anti-money laundering, to address money laundering and to counter financing of terrorism as well. So I think that's an important agreement on which we're making some
So I'm going to take 2 more questions, and then we have to unfortunately end. We have one over here, and then Tony here.
My name is Erwin C.B. Obi. I taught college some years back. I was wanting to know, having read about the educational level of the populace in Angola, you cannot build a viable economic or political institution without good educated people. I wanted to know what the government of Angola is doing to educate its masses to benefit. Because if you do not have an educated masses, the U.S. companies will go there and do their business and take their money back. It doesn't profit the Angolans.
Thank you for your question. Sorry, we have to wrap up with these questions here.
Welcome, Minister, and I welcome a new Angola, as many people do in this room. But one of the things that doesn't seem to have changed an awful lot is the troubling relationship with Cabinda. It's still with Cabinda. Wondering what your roadmap is on trying to reduce tensions between Cabinda and Angola, and how will you be able to make sure that Cabindans feel more included in the new Angola than they have been in the past?
So why don't we take that one first, and then we'll end on education, because I know Del can have something to say on training programs, et cetera, that they've done in Angola.
So on Cabinda, there is no tension between Cabinda and Angola because Cabinda is Angola. Cabinda is part of Angola, that is for sure. We have, we don't hide that in Cabinda there is some reivindications as we have now in Lunda. Lunda is the area of diamond producing, is the diamond producing area which border with the DRC, where also we have news that there are some groups that they say that Lunda, because as diamonds, must be independent. No, we are addressing these Cabinda problems correctly since, and we had the support of countries like U.S. And we can say now that the area is peaceful. Cabinda is actually most of the American companies, the main American companies in the oil, they operate in Cabinda, like Chevron. And we are addressing the problem for us in Cabinda is a social problem. We must address the social problem because I think that they are right. People say, we are the area who produce more oil and we don't have electricity, we don't have power. Why? So where this oil goes? So we, now in this government, we are addressing these social problems. By the way, we just approved one private investment for the refinery. Cabinda will have one refinery in Cabinda. And this is a private investment. Some Angolans and foreign partners, they will do. Because Cabinda is there, only 200,000 inhabitants, and they have some small problems which are not acceptable. So we are addressing this now straight to the point. It's social, and not political.
And on the social side, education, it's got to be key as part of that.
Education, that is a very good question. President Lorenzo in his program of government, but especially on his inaugural address, announced one program, what we call the Excellence Program. From this year, we are talking about from top down. From this year, every year, the government will select the 300 best students in the universities to send them to the best universities in the world, starting by Harvard University, going to Sorbonne and London School of Economics, sponsored by the government. This is one of the programs, and the first group just left this year. This is the excellence program. But on down, we are with the program to see if in 2025 we can eradicate the illiteracy in the base. This is another program on education, because we fully agreed with the gentleman who raised the question that we can have oil, we can have diamonds and everything. If we don't have the human resources, we will not succeed. There are countries with non-mineral resources, and they are on the top of the world. Yeah. Singapore is one example, Ireland is another example, and so on and so on. Okay. So we are very much embarked on this thinking that the main investment we must do is on the human being.
Yeah. Well, with that, Minister, I don't think anyone in this room disagrees with the importance of human capital in Africa's transformation. And I know the U.S. and GE and other partners stand ready to help on investing in those spaces. But let me thank you so much for being open, candid, energetic for all these questions we've had today. I know there's a lot more interest. I'm sorry we couldn't get to all your questions, but know that you have to, sorry we can't right now because we have to wrap up, but he's fast to fly back this evening to go and moderate this important discussion between Uganda and Rwanda. So with that, let us thank the Minister.
Yeah, thank you.